I'm hardly the first person to note the similarities between Auburn's overall season and the way that Tennessee game played out in Nashville, right? I mean, it
Right.
looked like Auburn had it in the bag, just like Auburn after the Texas game looked like they were assuredly an NCAA tournament team, but just a brutal final quarter or so of the season takes Auburn from securely in the NCAA tournament to one of the first four teams out. And I think I think Auburn does have a really interesting case, or had a
Sure.
really interesting case for the NCAA tournament. There are strong reasons as to why Auburn should not have been in. I think there were some compelling and strong reasons as to why Auburn should have been included. I think there are multiple lessons to take away from this. I do wonder, and I mean, look, I acknowledge Auburn won one game in February, right, and lost multiple games to teams that are not in the NCAA tournament in SEC play. I do wonder if there is the takeaway that Auburn's strong non-conference schedule ended up playing against Auburn in
Right.
this situation.
Right. Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if you take the four quad one non-conference losses away from home, Houston, Michigan, Arizona, and Purdue, and you replace two or three of those games with quad three home wins. Does Auburn have a stronger case for the NCAA tournament? Because
Mm.
people are focusing on the win-loss record in a way that suggests, well, if Auburn was 20-13, right,
Right.
or if Auburn had gotten to that magical 20-win plateau, they would have been more deserving of the NCAA tournament than the team that presented itself at 17-16. So, I mean, look, it's hard to advocate for a team that finished the season the way Auburn did, as though they absolutely belong in. I don't think it was ridiculous, especially when you think about the bubble and some of the teams Auburn was campaigning against for these spots. I don't think it's
Yep.
ridiculous to include Auburn, but I totally understand why the committee ended up going with some other teams. I am a little surprised Texas got the nod. I wasn't crazy about Texas's overall resume, and I thought they also stumbled down the stretch in a way that the committee might have found unappealing. But
Hmm.
ultimately, as you pointed out, head-to-head matters some, but Auburn finds itself on the outside looking in, and two teams that Auburn beat in the regular season are in that first four, NC State and Texas.
Yeah, I think if you do want to play the comparison game, the Auburn Texas one is an interesting one. Obviously, head to head is some one that people pointed out. The non-conference schedule is easy because I made the point heading into that Tennessee game. I posted this online, and I was like, there were so many people saying, "Well, Auburn can't get in because look at their overall record," and I'm like, okay, well, if you took, like you were saying, Dan, like if you took those losses away, or maybe not even all of them, maybe say you take three of them. Like, look, Auburn played Houston and Arizona and Purdue in these home and home ish type of series. You draw Michigan in players there. That's the luck of the draw for the most part. Oregon ended up being terrible this season, but you get a great win against St. John's because of it. So let's just say that didn't happen, and instead Auburn played three, bye games, basically. And they finish 20-13 instead of 17-16. Do they get in, even if the three teams they beat were cannon fodder? I don't know because you look at Texas. And Texas's non-conference schedule was really interesting this year because they beat NC State in Maui. They lost to Arizona State. They lost to Virginia. They lost to UConn, and they lost to Duke. That was their opener. Um, so they had good games on their schedule, but every other game was just ridiculous. Lafayette, Fairleigh Dickinson, Kansas City, Ryder, Southern, Lemoyne, Maryland Eastern Shore, and then they drew Chaminade, the non D1 team in Maui. All of their non quality, like every team they played outside of high majors and non-con, and they only played four high majors. Compared to an Auburn team that played what Auburn played seven, eight. Um, I I wonder how much difference that would have made, because it shouldn't help their resume at all. It shouldn't matter. even with those non-conference games that I mentioned for Texas, they still finished 321 in non-con SOS on Ken Palm. Meanwhile, Auburn finished 25th. I don't know how much that matters. Um, I do think what really, really matters, um, more than anything, Dan, is that Auburn, you're right. Like, they lose 9 of their last 12, right? One of them's to Mississippi State. One of them's to Oklahoma, who also doesn't make the tournament. One of them's at home to Ole Miss. Okay. Those are three losses right there to teams that did not make the dance. Texas lost 5 out of their last 6, but look at who they lost to. Georgia in the field, Florida obviously in the field. Arkansas wins the SEC tournament. They lose to Oklahoma, but it was in overtime by 3. Um, and they lose to Ole Miss, but away from home. So Texas's finish was a little bit better. Before that, they had won 5 straight. They did beat Texas A&M in College Station during that stretch. So it is interesting, Dan, because I feel like the resume leans towards Auburn. The metrics lean towards Auburn over Texas. Obviously, the head-to-head, which we'll talk about how much that matters. But I think for Auburn, it was a case of, okay, down the stretch of the season, Auburn did not win several games they needed to win to prove that, okay, they're NCAA tournament quality, and they didn't get to pick up one more nice win like like beating A&M on the road was for Texas. Wasn't an amazing win, but it's a really, really good win for them. Meanwhile, Texas, the teams they lose to down the stretch until really Mississippi, Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, which line up if you lost to Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, because there's several of y'all out there. That to me was like, okay, that's the argument for Texas, is that, okay, Texas heading into the tournament looked more like an NCAA tournament team. The eye test helps them out a little bit more than maybe the overall body of work.